There is something about San Francisco in the 1970s that captures a moment unlike anywhere else in America. It was a city of counterculture energy, grassroots activism, and a sense that the city was writing its own rules. If you lived through it, you know exactly what made that decade so electric. This was a time when San Francisco was becoming the most unconventional city in America. The hippie movement was transforming into something new. The gay rights movement was finding its voice in the Castro. Activism was everywhere, from environmentalism to civil rights. San Francisco felt like the place where America's future was being debated on every street corner. This was the decade that gave us Harvey Milk's election, the birth of the modern environmental movement, legendary music venues, and a lifestyle that celebrated individuality above everything else. The summer of love was over, but San Francisco was inventing what liberation meant for the next generation. Living in San Francisco meant embracing a city that refused to be like anywhere else. Let's walk through what daily life actually felt like during that remarkable decade. Some of this might bring back memories. Some of it might explain why San Francisco became the symbol of American counterculture. Let's step into that world. Living in San Francisco in the 1970s meant navigating a city of distinct neighborhoods, each with its own personality. The Victorian and Edwardian houses that lined the streets were painted in bright colors, standing in rows on steep hills. These were not the pristine painted ladies they would become later. Many were divided into apartments, often rent-controlled, making the city affordable for artists, activists, and working people. Apartments were small. Most people lived in flats with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and bay windows. Radiator heat clanked and hissed. Kitchens were tiny. Living rooms had the same harvest gold and avocado green that defined the era everywhere, but San Francisco added its own bohemian touch with tapestries on walls, incense burning constantly, and houseplants everywhere. The fog was a constant presence. Summer mornings meant waking to gray skies and that damp chill that never quite left. Mark Twain never actually said the coldest winter he ever spent was a summer in San Francisco, but locals repeated it anyway because it captured the truth. Everyone learned to layer clothing. The temperature could change 20 degrees from one neighborhood to another. The Haight-Ashbury district was transitioning from its hippie heyday. The summer of love was years past, but the neighborhood retained its counterculture identity. Head shops, used clothing stores, and communal houses remained. The streets had a grittier energy now. Drugs were a visible problem. Heroin had replaced marijuana and LSD as the drug of choice for many, bringing addiction and crime. But the hate was still where young people came seeking alternative lifestyles. The Castro was transforming into the gayest neighborhood in America. Gay men were moving to San Francisco in unprecedented numbers, creating a visible, proud community. Castro Street had gay bars, shops, and businesses. This was revolutionary. For the first time, gay people could live openly without hiding. Harvey Milk opened his camera shop on Castro Street in 1972. He became known as the mayor of Castro Street, helping neighbors with city bureaucracy and organizing the community. His energy and activism made him a leader. The Mission District was the heart of Latino San Francisco. Mexican and Central American immigrants had created a vibrant neighborhood with taquerias, markets, and murals covering building walls. The Mission had the warmest weather in the city because the fog usually stopped before reaching it. North Beach remained the Italian neighborhood and the literary heart of the city. City Lights Bookstore, founded by Lawrence Ferlinghetti in the 1950s, was still the gathering place for poets and writers. The legacy of the Beats lingered. Coffee shops and small restaurants lined the streets. Chinatown was densely packed, one of the oldest and largest Chinese communities outside Asia. Dim sum restaurants, herbalists, and markets created a world distinct from the rest of San Francisco. Pacific Heights and Nob Hill were where old money lived, grand homes with views of the bay. These neighborhoods felt worlds away from the hate or the mission. Getting around San Francisco in the 1970s meant dealing with the city's geography and its unique transportation. The hills were brutal. Driving meant learning to navigate streets that went straight up, parking with your wheels turned toward the curb and hoping the brakes held. Cars needed good clutches and patient drivers. BART opened in 1972, connecting San Francisco to the East Bay through the Trans-Bay Tube under the bay. This was a massive engineering achievement. The trains were modern and futuristic looking. BART made it possible to live in Oakland or Berkeley and work in San Francisco. The cable cars were still running, though they were becoming more of a tourist attraction than practical transportation. Locals knew which buses to take. The MUNI system was extensive but often slow and unreliable. Everyone had stories of buses that never came or that broke down in the middle of the route. Bicycling was becoming popular, though the hills made it challenging. Critical mass, the monthly bike ride protests, would not start until the 1990s, but the bicycle culture was growing. Food in San Francisco in the 1970s was beginning to change in ways that would influence American dining for decades. The farm-to-table movement was born in Berkeley, just across the bay, but it influenced San Francisco restaurants immediately. Fresh, local, seasonal ingredients were becoming valued. Chez Panisse opened in 1971, and its philosophy spread. Chinese food was everywhere, from dim sum palaces in Chinatown to neighborhood spots in every district. San Francisco had some of the best Chinese food in America because of the established Chinese community. Mexican food in the Mission was authentic and incredible. Taqueria served massive burritos that became a San Francisco institution. The Mission burrito, with rice and beans inside, was a San Francisco invention. Sourdough bread was a San Francisco specialty. Boudin Bakery had been making it since the gold rush, and the tangy bread was part of the city's identity. Dungeness crab from the bay was a seasonal delicacy. Fisherman's Wharf had tourist traps, but it also had fresh seafood. Crab served on sourdough was quintessential San Francisco eating. Coffee culture was evolving. Before Starbucks existed, San Francisco had European-style coffee houses. Café Trieste in North Beach had been serving espresso since the 1950s. Coffee was strong, served in small cups, and people lingered for hours. Natural foods and vegetarian restaurants were more common in San Francisco than anywhere else in America. Health consciousness and environmental awareness made people question what they ate. Juice bars and food co-ops appeared throughout the city. Before we continue with the music and activism that defined San Francisco in this era, if you are enjoying these glimpses into how people really lived and want to explore more decades and places, consider subscribe. There are so many more stories about how Americans built the life we know today. Music in San Francisco in the 1970s was legendary. The psychedelic rock of the 1960s was evolving into new sounds. The Fillmore and Winterland were the venues where everyone played. Bill Graham promoted concerts that became historic events. The Grateful Dead were San Francisco's band. They lived in the hate, played constantly, and created a community of deadheads who followed them everywhere. Their concerts were gatherings as much as performances. Jefferson Airplane had become Jefferson Starship, shifting from psychedelic rock toward more commercial sounds, and they remained San Francisco icons. The punk scene was emerging by the late 1970s. The Mabuhay Gardens, a Filipino supper club in North Beach, became the center of punk rock. The Dead Kennedys formed in 1978, creating politically charged punk with Jello Biafra's confrontational lyrics. Tower Records on Columbus Avenue and Bay Street was where people bought albums. People browsed for hours, discovered new music, and talked to staff who actually knew music. Record stores were social spaces. Activism was woven into daily life in San Francisco in the 1970s. The environmental movement was strong. The first Earth Day in 1970 had major participation in San Francisco. People were fighting to protect the bay, the coastline, and the remaining open spaces. The anti-war movement continued into the early 1970s until the Vietnam War ended in 1975. Protests were common. San Francisco had a tradition of taking to the streets. The gay rights movement was gaining momentum. Harvey Milk ran for supervisor multiple times before winning in 1977, becoming one of the first openly gay elected officials in America. His victory was celebrated throughout the Castro and beyond. Gay pride parades grew larger each year. In 1978, Harvey Milk and Mayor George Moscone were assassinated by Dan White, a former supervisor. The city was devastated. When White received a lenient sentence for manslaughter rather than murder, riots broke out. The White Night riots in May 1979 saw protesters clash with police. City Hall was damaged. Police cars were burned. The anger reflected the gay community's frustration with discrimination and violence. The women's movement was strong in San Francisco. Feminism was openly discussed. Women were demanding equality in ways that made San Francisco more progressive than most of America. Life in San Francisco in the 1970s was not easy for everyone. The city had serious problems. Crime was rising. Drugs, particularly heroin, created addiction and violence in some neighborhoods. The Zebra murders in 1973 and 1974, where racially motivated killings terrorized the city, created fear and tension. The economy struggled. The 1973 oil crisis hit hard. Inflation meant rising costs. The city's traditional industries, like shipping and manufacturing, were declining. The Jonestown Massacre in 1978 had San Francisco connections. Jim Jones had operated People's Temple in the city before moving his followers to Guyana. When over 900 people died in the mass murder and suicide, many victims had San Francisco ties. The tragedy shocked the city. Housing costs were already beginning to rise. The affordable San Francisco that allowed artists and activists to live in the city was starting to disappear. Rents were creeping up. What defined San Francisco in the 1970s was possibility mixed with struggle. This was a city where people came to live differently, to be themselves, to challenge conventions. The decade saw the gay rights movement find its power. It saw environmental activism become mainstream. It saw music, food, and culture evolving in ways that influenced the rest of America. For those who lived in San Francisco during the 1970s, it was a time of community, activism, and the sense that they were part of something important. The fog rolled in every afternoon. The neighborhoods each had their own character. The future felt uncertain but exciting. For those with memories of this extraordinary era in the city by the bay, there is always more history to explore.